All right, let's go ahead and get rolling this morning. Good morning, everybody. Thanks for tuning in to another edition of Mornings with the Museum. My name is Pat Kane. We're here at Museum of the Grand Prairie on a very snowy February morning here in Central Illinois. And in a few moments, we're going to get to talking about some love stories, this month's theme in this edition of Mornings with the Museum. But first, I want to thank our special guests again for joining us from the Museum of the Grand Prairie. So if we could, let's go around and introduce ourselves. Again, my name is Pat Kane. I'm Public Programs Visitor Services Coordinator at the Museum of the Grand Prairie, part of Champaign County Forest Preserve District. Barb, would you mind introducing yourself?
I'm Barb Wolfschlager-Garvey. I'm the Director of the Museum and Education Department at the Champaign County Forest Preserve District.
Thank you.
And go ahead.
I said thank you, Barb.
Thank you.
Katie, how about you?
Hi, I'm Katie Snyder. I'm the Education Program Specialist at Museum of the Grand Prairie, which is part of the Champaign County Forest Preserve District.
Thank you, Katie. And Mark, how about you?
Good morning. I'm Mark Hansen. I'm the curator at the Museum of the Grand Prairie.
And thank you, Mark. Thanks to all three of you. Thanks, everybody, for tuning in as well, those of you watching live or maybe watching this recorded at a later time. If you could, write down below where you are watching from. We've got Kathy tuning in, and Laura is tuning in from Urbana. She says, I remember you from back in the day at the U of I French department. Barb.
I know, I was really excited to see Laura. Laura, I remember you too.
Yeah, so that's awesome. Ramona tuning in from Rockford. Welcome back, Ramona. And my mom tuning in from Champaign while she's working. So hopefully she doesn't get in trouble, but I think she'll be okay. So again, write down below, let us know where you're watching from. Also, throughout the presentation, if you have a question, feel free to write that in the comment section. We would love to answer your questions here live during this program. So feel free to do that down in the comment section. Before we get going, just real quick, a few things coming up in the very near future at the Museum of the Grand Prairie. Tomorrow night, we're going to have our first ever virtual edition of our popular annual program, Maple Sugar Days, where we will talk all about the history, the science, and even how you can process your very own maple syrup if you have some maple trees on your property during this first edition of Maple Sugar Days. That program is going to happen at 7 p.m. Central Standard Time, again, live on our Museum of the Grand Prairie Facebook and YouTube pages. Also, two things to help celebrate Lincoln's 212th birthday later this week, in addition to some of those awesome craft bags that you may have picked up yesterday, whether they were the Lincoln craft bags or Valentine craft bags. We will, tomorrow, our very own Sandy Osborne is going to present Lincoln's farewell address given from Springfield tomorrow afternoon, again, on our Facebook and YouTube pages at 1 o'clock Central Standard Time. And on Friday, February 12th, we will have a special visit from Mary Lincoln herself, where she will join us to share special stories from the Lincoln family's time in the White House, and also help us celebrate our 16th president's birthday on Friday. Friday is his 212th birthday. So again, those programs happening virtually on the Museum of the Grand Prairie Facebook and YouTube pages. So to learn more about everything we're doing here at Museum of the Grand Prairie and throughout Champaign County Forest Preserve District, be sure to find us and follow us on social media, or check out museumofthegrandprairie.org or ccfpd.org. Again, feel free to let us know where you're watching from down below. Judy is tuning in from Newton. Thank you, Judy. And also ask us your questions, any and all questions. Send those in so we can make this more engaging for you and for us. It's a lot of fun when we get those questions. So without further ado, let's just go ahead and jump into today's program. So the theme, as you can see, we got some pink, we got some red, we got some hearts. We're here on February 10th. The theme for this edition of Mornings with the Museum with Valentine's Day coming right up is love stories. And I know that everyone watching is going to love what everyone has to share this morning. So who would like to go first? Barb, Katie, and Mark, you got some awesome stuff to share. Who would like to go first?
I'll go first.
So Barb is going to go first. So what I'm going to do, is I'm going to share my screen, and then Barb, I'll let you take it away.
Cool. Yeah, first I want to answer Laura. Ça va bien. Share the screen. Cool. Almost. Wow. So since it's Lincoln's 212th birthday on 2/12, I thought it would be fun to talk a little bit about Lincoln for Valentine's Day. So he had not one, not two, not three, but 4 girlfriends, if you count his wife, Mary Todd.
Not at the same time, though, right?
Not all at the same time, no. And he was pretty bad with most of them. Lincoln was born in Kentucky, and he moved to Indiana as a child, and then he moved kind of as an 18-year-old, 21-year-old to Illinois. And it was on his own in New Salem by the 1830s. And by the late 1830s, he'd moved to Springfield. So this first woman that I'm going to talk about is Sarah Rickard. She was actually a kid who lived in his house. Well, he was a roomer in somebody's house. And she was the kid in the house. And he moved in when she was 10, and he left when she was 16. But that last year that she was there, he took her out on dates, and her name is Sarah Rickard. And it particularly liked to go to the theater, and he took her to the theater. And he pretended oftentimes he proposed to her. And she said one time he said to her, now, Sarah, you know your Bible well enough to know that Sarah was Abraham's wife. So she loved to talk about this in her later years. And she said, if I just known he was going to be president, I would have paid more attention. But the next one I'm going to talk about, who looks a lot like Sarah, oddly, is Mary Owens. He met Mary Owens in New Salem when she was visiting her sister. And I guess he must have said to her, if you ever come back to New Salem, kind of look me up. I'll marry you. And this was in 1833, and in 1835 she came back for another visit, and apparently the sister heard it slightly differently than Abe did, and so he was being kind of pressed to keep his promise. And he wasn't really pleased with how she looked. He commented to somebody that she was kind of chubby, and and he said he was a little distressed by her want of teeth and weather-beaten appearance. That's in a letter right there.
Ooh, that's nice.
And he said, but I told her sister I'd take her for better or worse, so I better do it. And but his way of getting out of this promise was to go to Springfield to become a lawyer, which he, of course, eventually did. And when he did that, he wrote her back all these really kind of not terribly nice letters. One of them, which he said that life in Springfield would be a dull business. And he also said, you're going to have to be poor without hiding the means of your poverty. He said, what I said I will most positively abide by, provided you wish it. My opinion is that you better not do it. Like, I don't want you to have to keep up your end of the bargain. And eventually she didn't. She let him off the hook.
Huh.
I know.
I'm like, whoa.
What a guy, right?
All right.
He clearly was not that good with the lady. The next one is Anne Rutledge. And this is, there are actually no photographs or paintings of Anne Rutledge. This is a artist's reconstruction based on descriptions of her appearance. There's a lot written about Lincoln's relationship with Anne Rutledge, and there's good evidence that he was actually quite in love with her. The story was that Anne had already been promised to another man, some fellow who lived in New York, who had visited New Salem at some point, and he kept not keeping his promise to come back, and his letters got colder and colder, all the while Abraham and Anne's relationship was developing. And but unfortunately, Anne Rutledge died of typhoid a couple of years after they had met. And there's a lot of arguments either way, whether Anne and Abe ever actually had a relationship, but some people think that there's an anonymous poem called The Suicide Soliloquy about losing a love, and lots of people think that Lincoln actually wrote it, and it was written right after Anne Rutledge died, and Abe was known to have fallen into a depression after Anne died. When fellow Isaac Cogdell, somebody who had been Lincoln's friend, asked him while he was president whether he had fallen in love with Anne, he said, "It is true indeed I did. I loved a woman dearly and soundly. She was a handsome girl, would have made a good loving wife. I did honestly and truly love the girl and think often of her." So that's pretty, I think that's pretty tender, actually. It's pretty good for Abe because he's pretty bad at wooing people. Okay, the last one. Of course, this is Mary Todd, who he ended up with, but it wasn't because he was smooth, let me tell you. When he first met her at her sister's house, and it was at a dance, and he said he wanted to dance with her in the worst way, and apparently it was the worst dancing. They dated for a while. He asked her to marry him, and then he backed out. And then they secretly were engaged for a while, and finally they got married like in a big rush. So he wasn't terribly smooth even with Mary, but Mary put up with it, I guess. So they
What do you think the big rush was about? Was that before he would change his mind again, or
well,
what?
there's some speculation about that, and I won't go any further.
Oh, okay. Interesting. I'll have to read more about that. Okay.
Yeah, they were. Let's see. Yeah, they were married for over a year, though. So I don't know. I don't know what but I think it was my speculation is that Abe couldn't make up his mind about anything, and so she wanted to like nail his commitment while
Let's get that in
it
right.
was ready, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it was like 48 hours between when they announced it and they got married in her sister's house.
Wow.
So, yeah. Those are my Abe Lincoln stories.
Those were fun. I can go next, Pat.
Oh, okay. I'll just go ahead and pull yours back up then. Thanks, Barb, for the love stories of Lincoln.
That Abe, man, I had no idea.
What a smooth guy.
Kinda. That's one way of putting it. So this is Louise Carter Busey and Charles Bowen Busey. Now, if you live where we live in central Illinois, you have heard the name Busey. We have a Busey Woods. We have a Busey Street. We certainly have Busey Bank. We have a Carrie Busey School. Busey, all over the place. So these are some of the Buseys. Charles Bowen Busey went more by Bowen than Charles. I believe that was like a family name they kept passing down, and so they would go more by the middle name. And his wife, Louise Carter, was from Dallas. And I love her hat. You want to go to the next picture? Thank you. So he was in the family business. We talked a little bit about the banks. Some of you may bank with Busey. His dad, Samuel Busey, is up there further up than his name because this is like a family of bankers and all the different people in their family that banked. Samuel Busey is in our exhibit, Champaign County's Lincoln, because he was a Civil War veteran, and that was his dad. Bowen Busey went on to be in World War II.
One.
I'm sorry, you're right. One. I was thinking one and said two. Way too late. Yeah, go on to the next one, please. So we have some letters in our collection. Now, Barb may know more about this. Mark and I were talking about this. Louise Carter Busey spent a lot of time in Dallas right after their marriage. So she was in Dallas when these letters were going back and forth, and she was in Dallas for quite some time. Barb, are you sure why? Do you know for sure why she was there?
I thought she was from there. I don't know.
She is from there, but she spent a lot of time there after they were married, is what I'm saying. So I guess we don't exactly know why she spent so much
I
time.
don't know.
But we have some letters that are kind of love letters of the time. So we're going to show you some of the letters, and I'm just going to read you a little tiny piece of it. So this is a letter that Bowen wrote on December 3rd, 1911. Louise was in Dallas at the time. They're already married. She'd gone back to be with her family. I'm not quite sure why. But they talk about just regular things like how should we do Christmas because you're there and I'm here, and how we're going to do the presents. But then he says to her, I do wish I could see you once in a while and tell you how much I love you. Sweetheart, it would do me all sorts of good. Writing is a very poor substitute. Honey, it would be worth $1 million to look in your clear blue eyes right now, or to have you in my arms, and heaven knows what it would be worth to kiss you. Dearest, this X is a kiss, and there are a billion more waiting for you when I see you. Good night, darling. Bowen.
Aww.
Isn't that sweet? That's better than Abe, don't you think? A little smoother.
He's a much smoother guy than Abe.
Yeah. So then she writes back to him. So that actually, I think these letters probably crossed because his was December 3rd, 1911, and hers was December 1, 1911. So they probably wrote at the same time. First, she talks about like we had dinner. I ate like a pig, just like really regular old stuff. She talks about how Illinois lost to Minnesota because he was a graduate of Illinois, and how sad he must be about that. And she hopes to be home by baseball season. Barb will like that. Now, at the end, she says to him, honey, you are the sweetest boy in the world, and I don't care for anyone but you. And do you love me better than all in the world? And if you do, then I'm as happy as any girl can be. Pleasant dreams, honey dear, and all the love and kisses in the universe. Be good and love me, and try to be happy even if you are lonesome. Yours, Louise. And we've got one more quick letter.
I wish people still wrote letters, doesn't it?
Isn't it sweet? Because you could hold on to it. You could keep it. Not like a text that, I guess you could look at your own text. But anyway. So then the next year, she's back in Dallas. Or, I assume she came home and then came back. He was living on Main Street at the time. Barb, that building is gone now, right? That's where those apartments are, 502 West Main? Okay. So he writes her, he talks about a robbery that happened, and the silver was gone, but he wasn't going to really talk about that a whole lot. He writes her a little poem, and here it is. He says, honey, I wrote you a little poem the other night, which expresses my sentiment, though I won't vouch for the literary part. Here it is. Each tiny dimple in your smile must feel like that it is blessed to have the honor for a while of such a dainty nest. Such happiness if I could win for e'er a little while to nestle in your smile. That is all the letter I can write you tonight, sweetheart, for I haven't even had a chance to think. That's sweet, isn't it? Isn't that sweet? So they're writing back and forth, and he goes away to World War I. He volunteers at a later age. They already have one child, and he went in 1917, and unfortunately, he met his death while attempting to storm a machine gun nest, and he died in World War II. World War I. I keep saying two. Sorry. Yeah. And a while back, Barb had featured him in a little exhibit we had, but I hadn't really made the connection to him and well, I knew the Buey name, but like all the Urbana things, and later on we'll talk about a memorial. But if you go on to the next slide, so Memorial Stadium, I know if you are from Central Illinois, and maybe even if you aren't, you know about Memorial Stadium, where the football is played here. I'm not a big football person, but Memorial Stadium was made in memorial to soldiers from World War I. So this is a voucher for a $100 donation in memory of Bowen by his son. You see Charles Bowen Buey Jr. And if you go to the next slide, they're basically thanking him and saying, he's a little boy at the time, and they're saying, thank you to your mother, because basically his mother made this donation in the little boy's name for his, to remember his father. So I thought that was sweet, because that's kind of love and carrying on the family love after death. And if we go to the next slide, speaking of after death, so this is why I was interested in Bowen Buey, is I sometimes walk in Woodlawn Cemetery in Urbana, and that's my dog Frankie. There's this memorial that says, Lieutenant Charles Bowen Buey at the top, and it's big. You can tell with the dog there. He's a pretty big dog. It's big. It looks like a stage, and it's got little benches around the back where people could sit and have a picnic or whatever. And to us, in this time and place, that seems like an odd thing, right? We go to the next slide, Pat. But back then, people used to picnic in cemeteries. His dad, Samuel Buey, started that cemetery and said in a newspaper article I read that he wanted it to be a pleasant place where families could come and picnic together. So I always imagined, and I tried to find photos, but I couldn't. Did they have little concerts up there on that stage? What did they do on that stage? Or was it just a place to come and picnic? I'm not quite sure. But I always think that the family probably wouldn't mind us coming and hanging out at the memorial and, being with other people, or in the pandemic, being with our dog. It doesn't really click with our culture right now. But I think with their culture back then, they would appreciate people spending time in cemeteries and just walking around and being with each other.
Samuel Buey, from all of his life, had a big thing in the cemetery after he founded the cemetery, where he would recite the Gettysburg Address on Memorial Day.
Oh, would he do it up there on the stage? Because you walk up the stairs. There's the flag right there, and right up there is the memorial.
There's a picture after they built that memorial. There's a picture of, well, he was dead by then, but they continued the tradition.
That's cool, because the cemetery sits on a hill, and I thought it was connected to the flag right there, but I wasn't sure why. Mm-hmm. That's very cool. So if you have time and you want to go to a pretty place for a walk, I recommend it.
It's so cool. So sweet.
It is.
Yeah, I remember when those letters were on exhibit, and just reading them, it's just, you could just feel the love and feel the emotion, and Yeah, it's brought out a lot of emotion in me when I was reading them. You can feel, this man and this woman writing back and forth to each other and know how much they cared about each other, and it was really great to read.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah. Well, thank you, Katie, for sharing the story of Charles and Louise Buey, Bowen Buey. Mark, how about you? Got a story to share?
Yep, sure do. Want to go to my picture? So I'm sort of carrying on the theme of Black History Month with my part here this morning. This gentleman is Charles McGhee. He is a Tuskegee Airman. He is still living and was recently promoted to Brigadier General. So true American hero that we are lucky to still have with us. He is also strongly connected to Champaign. In 1940, he came to the U of I as an engineering student. And while he was here, he met Frances Nelson after church one Sunday morning. And at first, they didn't really become an item. But by 1941, he and Frances were a couple, and they were talking about getting married. And at the same time, Charles was trying to figure out, he knew he would have to serve in World War II in some capacity. And so they were talking about how he wanted to do that. And he decided that he wanted to fly. So he was accepted into the pilot training program and was waiting for his orders when he would go down to Tuskegee, Alabama. So during that wait period, he and Frances decided that they would get married. So on October 17th of 1942, they were married. And unfortunately, almost immediately after that, Charles got his orders and had to report to flight school on November 24th of that same year. The good news is that Frances had actually graduated from U of I, and so she went with him to Tuskegee, where she stayed while he was training. Then in 1944, Charles shipped out to Italy with the 302nd Fighter Squadron to start flying combat, which he did, and also served in Korea and Vietnam. So made a career of the military.
Wow.
Frances followed him basically wherever she could in his career. Their children followed. But what's interesting, and sort of the love story part of that, you can see in this picture that Charles is standing next to his P-51 fighter airplane, and you can see that written on the side of the airplane is Kitten. Pat, can we go to the next image? So this is an artist's rendition of what Charles' airplane would have looked like. And he named the airplane after his wife. Kitten, I believe, was his nickname for Frances. And it was obviously painted on both sides of the airplane. And so that's my love story about airplanes and the Tuskegee Airmen.
That's sweet.
Well, we covered all the territory, didn't we?
Yeah, all those love stories. And Frances Nelson, such a recognizable name here in the.
It's not the same Frances Nelson.
Oh, it's not? Okay. Completely different.
That's what I thought too, Pat. I said to Mark, Frances Nelson, but
Nope.
isn't that interesting? Yeah.
Two different people, two different stories.
Are they related? Does anybody know?
I don't know about that,
So,
but they're not the same. Anyway.
Well, thanks, Mark. Thank you, Barb and Katie. Ramona asks in the comment section, I think she was referring to Katie, your story of Charles and Louise Buey when you guys were discussing why she went to Texas. Ramona says, could she be going to Texas for health reasons?
We wondered about that. Like Mark thought he had read somewhere perhaps that the father was ill, but I was thinking, her father. But I was thinking if he was ill for a long time because
she there's no mention in the letters of her being ill, but there is every once in a while there's a passing mention of, she hopes that her father is better by Christmas, or so there is some passing remarks about health issues, but they don't seem to be hers.
And it could be a long-term illness, that she goes back and forth for. But Mark and I were also talking about how much more difficult it was to go back and forth at that time. It's not like you could fly, she's taking the train, so she has to stay for a duration. It's not like you go, hey, I'm going to go to California for a week. Yeah, I mean, that's not what people could do back then. So she stayed for a bit.
Yeah, I was just thinking about the difficulty of travel.
Yeah, in the letters they do talk about when he's coming down to visit, and travel is always a major. We sort of take that for granted today. We could just hop in our car and go somewhere.
Right.
Just the very act of getting from point A to point B was a pretty big deal, especially when there was great distances. And so the letter they talk about traveling a lot, the train and how long it takes, and
that
becomes
also
a much bigger deal.
That also shows their lifestyle, that they were able to do something like that. Many people, if you've married someone, if you come from Dallas, you marry someone in Illinois, you may be lucky to see those people back home again,
Right.
So they were obviously well-to-do to be able to pull that off.
Yep.
Good question, though.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Ramona. But I'm not seeing any other questions. But if you do happen to have any questions, feel free to write those in after our live broadcast here, and we can check back with you later on those comments. But I love these love stories. This is great. This time of the year, very, or any time of the year, just to hear them. So appreciate Barb, Katie, and Mark, you sharing these local stories from history. Thanks everybody for tuning in this morning. And Barb, Katie, Mark, got any final words for those watching?
Well, I was just wondering when our next one of these is, my friend.
Oh, our next one in March. Yeah. So Wednesday, March 10th, we're going to do another edition of Mornings with the Museum, trying to do these on the second Wednesday of every month. And the theme is springtime tales. So hopefully by then it'll be a little warmer, at least here in central Illinois. And we can actually think that spring is either arrived or very, very near. So springtime tales next go round.
And if anybody has anything they'd like to talk about in the spring, just pop it on our Facebook page or write us a Facebook message. We'll be happy to try to talk about it next time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Always love to hear from everybody. So feel free to reach out to us, as Barb mentioned. Laura, this was fun. Thanks.
Yay. It was nice to see you, Laura.
All right. Well, again, thanks, everybody. And until next time, we will see you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye-bye.